My name is Alex. I'm 35 years old and I'm a financial analyst. If you ask me what the most important moment in my life was, I would say without hesitation that it was the day I met Emma at NYU. It was a sunny fall afternoon and I was hurrying through Washington Square Park to get to my next class. Suddenly, a breeze swept by, swirling up the leaves on the ground, and I inadvertently caught eyes with a girl who was reading a book on a bench. At that moment, it was as if time stood still. Her long brown hair was glowing golden in the sunlight, and her bright smile made me forget to breathe for a moment. Ghostly, I walked up and pretended to ask for directions. And that's how I met Emma, an international marketing student 2 years older than me. We chatted all afternoon about everything from our majors to our life aspirations to our favorite New York pizza places. That night, we had dinner at a small restaurant in the village of Greenwich, and each felt like we had found the other half of our destiny. Since then, our lives have been like a Hollywood rom-com. We dated, fought, made up, stargazed on the grass in Central Park, and made promises on the Brooklyn Bridge. After graduation, I went to work for an investment bank on Wall Street, and Emma started her career in the marketing department of a multinational company. One weekend 3 years later, I took Emma to Long Island. We strolled along the beach, and the setting sun shimmered on the ocean in a golden glow. It was there that I got down on one knee and asked her to marry me, and Emma cried tears of joy and nodded her head, yes. At that moment, I felt like the happiest person in the world. Our wedding was held at the Brooklyn Botanic Gardens, and Emma's beauty in her white wedding dress took my breath away. The moment the vows were exchanged, I made a secret vow in my heart to cherish and protect this woman forever. After the wedding, we moved into an apartment in Brooklyn Heights and started our married life. After 2 years of marriage, Emma got pregnant. During those 9 months, we were busy decorating the nursery, attending maternity classes, and picking out baby items. Every night, I would gently touch Emma's bulging belly and talk to the little life inside. One early morning in May 2018, our daughter Sophie came into the world. When I held her for the first time, there are no words to describe the happiness I felt. When Emma returned to work after her maternity leave, we began our busy dual career life. Despite our busy schedules, we spend as much time as possible with Sophie, taking her to Central Park every weekend for a picnic or to a museum. Watching Sophie grow up day by day, learning to talk and toddle, our lives are full of laughter and happiness. At work, I was getting good at what I did. On Wall Street, I stood out for my market insights and analytical skills, and at age 30, I was promoted to senior analyst, earning a six-figure salary, and Emma's career flourished when she was sent on a 6-month project to Europe and was promoted to international marketing manager upon her return. With a stable financial base, we decided to move to a bigger home. With the help of our agent, we found an ideal 4-bedroom apartment on the Upper West Side. The floor-to-ceiling windows from the living room overlook Central Park, and the view is especially stunning at night. We invested a lot of effort and money in renovations to make this the home of our dreams. Life seemed to be on track. I had an enviable career, a beautiful and intelligent wife, a lovely daughter, and a luxury apartment in Manhattan. We sometimes joke with our friends that our life is a perfect illustration of the American dream. However, as they say, life is always full of surprises. Just as I was immersed in this seemingly perfect life, I didn't realize that undercurrents had crept in and a storm was brewing that would destroy our marriage. If I had it to do over again, I'm not sure I would have been able to notice those subtle changes. Perhaps some things are meant to happen, and all we can do is try to keep our inner peace when the storm hits. Life is as unpredictable as the weather in New York. Just when I thought I had it all under control, fate hit me in the face. As Sophie started kindergarten, Emma's work became busier and busier. She began to travel frequently, sometimes being away from home for half of the month. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, in a city as competitive as New York, it's inevitable that you have to give more when your career is on the rise. We agreed to video call each other if we traveled, and she always laughed and told me interesting things about her business trips, and also asked how Sophie was doing. However, subtle changes always creep in unnoticed. One night, after putting Sophie to bed, I realized that Emma had forgotten to video us. I sent her a message, and she replied that she was having dinner with a client and would call later. That night, I waited until 2 a.m. to receive her slightly tired video call. I started to notice more and more party photos popping up on Emma's social media. On Instagram, she was raising a glass of wine with various men in suits, with a big smile on her face that I hadn't seen in a long time. When I asked about these photos, she always downplayed them as work functions and told me not to think too much of them. The other night, I caught a glimpse of Emma's cell phone screen lit up with a message from Jack. "What a great night. Can't wait to see you again." My heart sank, but when I asked who this Jack was, Emma said it was the company's new British client, with a hint of impatience in her tone. I tried to convince myself not to get carried away. After all, Emma had been a devoted wife and mother. But that lingering sense of unease crept over me like a late-night haze in New York. The turning point came on a Friday night. My company was hosting a big dinner at a fancy restaurant near Wall Street, and Emma was supposed to accompany me, but canceled at the last minute because of a work emergency. I attended alone and was a little disappointed. Just as I was exchanging pleasantries with a few of my coworkers, my eyes were drawn to the scene at the other end of the restaurant. There, Emma was chatting with a tall, handsome man. They were acting close and exchanging glances every now and then. At that moment, I felt as if my heart had been gripped hard. I resisted the urge to ask questions and watched silently for a while, Emma smiling brightly with a sparkle in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. The man was also very caring, refilling her drink from time to time and putting his coat on her. I quietly snapped a few pictures and then made my excuses to leave the dinner early. That night, I got drunk alone in a bar near Central Park, the image of Emma with that man constantly replaying in my mind. It was early in the morning when Emma got home. She entered softly, obviously thinking I was asleep. I pretended to be asleep on the couch and secretly watched her every move. She still had a slight blush on her face and a hint of a smile, if any, hanging at the corner of her mouth. The next morning I tried to talk to Emma about last night. I asked her where she had been in the evening and who she had met. She said it was a dinner with some clients, her tone relaxed and natural. I pressed on if there was a British client named Jack, and she gave me a slightly surprised look before nodding her head in acknowledgement. "How do you know?" she asked. I shrugged and said, feigning carelessness, "Guess. You mentioned him recently." Emma seemed relieved and continued to prepare breakfast as if nothing had happened. I watched her busy back with mixed feelings. How I wished my suspicions were unwarranted, but that uneasy feeling grew stronger. From that day on, I started secretly investigating Emma's whereabouts. I went through her credit card statements and found several purchases at fancy hotels without my knowledge. I tried to check her cell phone, but found that she had changed the password. Whenever I asked her about her work and social life, she downplayed it and sometimes looked a little annoyed. I know that my behavior may seem a bit paranoid, but the powerlessness and fear you feel when the people closest to you are moving away from you is unspeakable. I began to lose sleep and my productivity was not what it used to be. On a few occasions, I almost made a mistake in an important client meeting, which was fortunately corrected by my coworkers in time. I was sitting alone on my balcony one night, looking out over the glittering night view of Manhattan, when I suddenly realized that I had to take action. I couldn't keep being so paranoid. I needed to know the truth, no matter how heartbreaking that truth would be. It was at that moment that I made a decision, one that could change our relationship forever. I decided to thoroughly investigate all of Emma's whereabouts. I knew that doing so might hurt the trust between us, but I had no choice. I needed the truth, even if the truth could destroy our marriage. Looking at a sleeping Sophie, I mentally apologized to her. Dad may be about to do something less than honorable, but it's all about protecting our family. I take a deep breath and start planning my next move. The night in New York was getting thicker, and inside me, it was darker than the city's night. Fall is coming unusually fast to New York City. The leaves in Central Park are beginning to yellow, and the coffee shops on the streets are offering pumpkin latte specials. And I'm standing at a crossroads in my life, about to unveil a truth that could change my life forever. Emma was traveling again, this time to Chicago. I offered to drive her to the airport, and she was a little surprised, but readily agreed. On the way to JFK Airport, we chatted about family matters, and the atmosphere seemed to be the same as usual. But only I knew that while helping her with her luggage, I quietly put a miniature GPS tracker in her suitcase. Be careful on your way and stay safe. I kissed Emma on the cheek before the security checkpoint and watched her disappear into the crowd. Back in the car, I took a deep breath and opened the tracker app. For the next few days, I stared at my phone screen like a paranoid stalker. Emma's trajectory seemed normal, flying from New York to Chicago and checking into a downtown hotel. I almost had to convince myself that maybe it was all in my head. However, on the third morning, everything changed. The tracker shows that Emma left Chicago, but didn't go back to New York. Instead, she went to Las Vegas. My heart sank. She never mentioned going to Vegas. I called her immediately, and the phone rang for a long time before being picked up. "Hey Alex, what's up?" Emma's voice held a hint of unnaturalness. "Nothing. Just wanted to ask if everything is going well in Chicago?" I forced myself to be calm. "Well, everything's fine. I have a couple more meetings today, so I'll be back in New York tonight." I clenched my fists and tried to control my emotions. "Okay, be safe. Love you." I felt a wave of vertigo as I hung up the phone. Emma was lying, and so gently. My mind went blank, and I didn't know what to do. Just then, I remembered something. The password to Emma's usual cloud storage account is our wedding anniversary. Maybe. I hesitated, but curiosity and anger eventually overcame my sense of morality. I opened my computer and logged into her account. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. Work documents, family photos, daily memos, everything seemed normal. But when I clicked on a folder called Work Backups, my world came crashing down. Inside were countless text messages with Jack and some intimate photos. Some were in fancy restaurants, some were in hotel rooms, and some, I couldn't look any further. Each photo was like a sharp knife, piercing my heart. I slumped into my chair, feeling breathless. The room suddenly became unusually quiet, and all I could hear was my own violent heartbeat. My mind went blank, not knowing what to do with the information. Suddenly, a sharp wave of nausea hit me. When I finally slowed down and looked at my haggard self in the mirror, tears flowed uncontrollably. I thought back to our first date at that little restaurant in the village. I think of Emma's surprised face when we proposed on the Brooklyn Bridge. I thought about the day Sophie was born, when we held each other tightly and envisioned a bright future. Was it all a lie? I picked up my cell phone and ghost-dialed my best friend Thomas's number. He was my college roommate and now worked at NYPD. "Hey man, what's up?" Thomas's voice came over the receiver. I took a deep breath and tried to sound normal. "Thomas, can you check on someone for me?" There was silence on the other end of the line for a moment. "Alex, what's going on? You don't sound right." I told Thomas briefly what happened. He listened and sighed. "Alex, I'm sorry, but you have to realize that this is not legal." I know, I said eagerly, "but I want to know the truth. Please." There was another silence. Finally, Thomas compromised. "Okay, while I can't help you with your inquiries through the NYPD, I will use my personal connections to help you. But please also promise me that no matter what the outcome is, you won't do anything stupid. Give me the guy's info and I'll see what I can find out." After hanging up the phone, I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me. I collapsed on the couch and stared at the ceiling. Outside the window, the hustle and bustle of New York remained. But in my world, everything stood still. A few hours later, Thomas sent me a report. Jack's full name is Jack Harrison, an Englishman who works as an executive in a multinational company. He's been frequenting New York lately, often spending money in high-class hotels and restaurants. There were also some surveillance screenshots, a couple of which were clearly of him and Emma together. After reading the report, I felt a void like I had never felt before. All my doubts were confirmed, but I did not feel any relief. On the contrary, I felt even more confused and helpless. That night, I was home alone and drunk. I flipped through our wedding album and looked at it page by page. Each photo was once so beautiful, and now it seemed like a great irony. I remembered that Sophie was still at my parents' house and felt a sudden pang of gratitude. At least she didn't have to see Dad in this sorry state. The next morning, I went to work with a hangover headache. My coworkers all noticed that something was wrong with me, but I just said perfunctorily that I hadn't slept well. Sitting in my office, I stared at my computer screen in disbelief, my mind constantly replaying bits and pieces of the past few years. I began to wonder which ones were real and which ones were fake. Emma is supposed to come back today. I don't know how to confront her. Should I question her immediately? Or pretend everything is as usual and secretly collect more evidence? I feel lost and helpless like never before. After work, I didn't go straight home. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of Manhattan and finally walked to the Brooklyn Bridge without realizing it. Standing on the bridge, watching the East River flow silently, I suddenly realized that my life, my marriage, might never go back to the way it was. I took out my phone and hesitated for a long time before finally sending Emma a message. I might be home late tonight. You don't have to wait for me. Then I turned off my cell phone and continued to stand on the bridge, watching the night slowly fall and the neon lights come on one by one. New York, the city that never sleeps, looked so strange and cold to me at the moment. I know that a storm is coming, and I, for one, must be ready to face it. I stood on the Brooklyn Bridge for a long time that night. It wasn't until late at night, when the cold wind was biting, that I realized I had to go home and face reality. Emma was already asleep, or pretending to be, when I walked into our apartment. I shuffled gingerly, then lay down on the bed in the guest room and stared at the ceiling. The next day was Saturday. I got up early and called my parents to ask if they could watch Sophie for a few more days. I made up an excuse that Emma and I had an important work seminar to attend. Mom readily agreed and said Sophie had been having a great time at their place lately. Hanging up the phone, I take a deep breath. At least Sophie won't be involved in this storm for a while. Emma got up and we ate our breakfast in relative silence. She seemed to sense something, and several times she wanted to say something. Finally, she broke the silence. Alex, are you okay? You've been feeling a little off lately. I looked up at her, the face I had loved for years. At the moment, however, I felt a pang of strangeness. I'm fine, I said calmly. Just a little tired from work. By the way, I'm going to be working late at the office today. Do you have any plans? Emma blinked, seeming a little surprised by my reaction. Oh, I might go shopping with some friends. I nodded and got up to clean up the dishes. Okay, have fun. After leaving my apartment, I didn't go to the office. Instead, I drove to Long Island where an old friend, Mike, was an attorney specializing in divorce cases. Mike's office is located in an old brick building with peaceful beach windows. We used to come here for weekends when we were in college. How young and carefree we were. Alex, long time no see. Mike hugged me warmly and then looked at me with concern. You look tired. Did something happen? I smiled bitterly, then told him the whole story. Mike listened quietly, then sighed. I'm sorry, man. It really is a tricky situation. Over the next few hours, Mike explained in detail the divorce process, property division, child custody, and other issues. I carefully memorized every detail and felt like I was taking a brutal exam. Alex, Mike finally said, I know you're in a lot of pain right now, but remember, don't do anything impulsive. Stay calm, gather evidence, and protect yourself and Sophie. If you decide to get a divorce, I'll do everything I can to help you. I gratefully shook Mike's hand. Thank you, Mike. I'll think about it. Leaving Mike's office, I didn't go home immediately. I drove to the Montauk Point Lighthouse and stood on the edge of the cliff, looking out over the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean. The ocean breeze messed up my hair and seemed to blow away some of my inner gloom. I remembered Emma and I had our first date here. We watched the sunset and made wonderful promises. Looking back now, how ironic those vows were. It was evening by the time I got back to New York. I sent Emma a text saying that I was still working late and that she didn't have to wait for me. Then I drove to a bar near Central Park, ordered a vodka, and started thinking hard about my next move. First, I needed to protect my property. Early the next morning, I went to the bank to open a new personal account and transferred part of my savings into it. Then, I contacted a private detective and asked him to continue to track Emma's whereabouts and collect more evidence. For the next week, I ostensibly maintained a normal couple relationship with Emma. We ate together, talked, and even watched a movie together. But every time she came near me, I felt a pang of discomfort. Those intimate gestures, which used to make me happy, now felt like torture. I started making secret arrangements for the divorce. I organized all my financial documents and made a list of my assets. I even started looking for a new apartment in case I needed to move out. At the same time, I'm thinking about how to tell Sophie. She's still young, just the right age to need a complete family. The thought of having to explain why mom and dad can't live together anymore hurts my heart so much I can't breathe. One night, Emma went out to socialize and I was home alone. I took out our wedding ring and scrutinized it. It was engraved with our names and the date of our wedding. I remember how happy we were, thinking that this love would last forever. I shook my head bitterly and put the ring back in the drawer. Then, I turned on my computer and started drafting the divorce agreement. With every word I tapped, I felt my heart dripping blood. But I knew that this could be necessary preparation. The next morning, I pretended to accidentally leave the draft of the divorce papers on the desk in the study. I knew that Emma often went into the study to organize her things. I wanted to see how she would react. Maybe it would force her to tell the truth. Sure enough, when I got home that afternoon, I found Emma's eyes red and swollen, obviously from crying. She looked at me with a desire to speak, but ultimately said nothing. I pretended not to notice her abnormality and just said I was tired and needed to take a shower. Standing under the shower, the hot water washed over my body and I felt no warmth. I knew that a difficult conversation was coming. I had to be ready to face all possible outcomes. That night, I lay in bed, listening to Emma's suppressed sobs in the bathroom. I closed my eyes and imagined what our lives would be like if this hadn't happened. But reality was harsh, and I had to be strong, for myself and for Sophie. Tomorrow, I think, tomorrow I'll have my showdown with Emma. Whatever the outcome, at least this ordeal can end. With that thought in mind, I slowly fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, I woke up early. New York's sunlight poured in through the cracks in the curtains. I lay in bed and pondered how to begin what was destined to be a difficult conversation. I woke up and decided to prepare a nice breakfast for us. It would probably be the last time we would have breakfast together as a normal family. I fried bacon and eggs, toasted bread, and squeezed fresh orange juice, just like I used to do every weekend morning when we were first married. Emma was visibly startled by the scene as she walked into the kitchen. "Alex, how are you free to make breakfast today?" There was a hint of alarm in her tone, as if she realized something unusual was about to happen. I forced a smile. "Have a seat. We'll talk while we eat." We ate our breakfast in silence, a strange tension in the air. Finally, I put my fork down and looked Emma straight in the eye. "Emma, let's talk?" Her body visibly stiffened for a moment before she slowly nodded. "Is this about that file in your study?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, but not just that. Emma, I know you went to Vegas, not Chicago. I know about Jack. I know all of it." Emma's face instantly lost its color. Her lips trembled as she tried to say something, but in the end, only a low sob escaped. "Why, Emma?" I tried to keep my emotions in check. "Where did we go wrong? Was I not doing enough?" Emma shook her head as tears began to slide down her cheeks. "No, Alex, it's not your fault. It's me. I don't know what happened to me. Jack, he just what?" I interrupted her, a hint of malice in my voice that I didn't even realize I had. "Just someone who understands you better than I do? Just someone who can give you what I can't." "That's not true." Emma suddenly got excited. "Alex, I love you. I've always loved you, Jack. It was just a mistake. A stupid, fucking mistake." I laughed bitterly. "A mistake that went on for months? Emma, do you expect me to believe that?" Emma lowered her head and covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking from crying. I sat there, looking at the woman I once loved so much, but felt a wave of strangeness and detachment. "Is our marriage salvageable?" I asked softly at last. Emma looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Will you forgive me?" I was silent for a long time. Memories come flooding back. Our first date, our proposal on the Brooklyn Bridge, the scene when Sophie was born and we cried in each other's arms. But all of these wonderful memories were now tainted by Emma's betrayal. "I don't know, Emma," I finally said. "I really don't. But I do know that I can't trust you right now. Without trust, how can we continue?" Emma nodded. seeming to understand something. She stood up and said softly, "I understand. I I need some time." I felt a wave of exhaustion hit me as I watched Emma walk into the bedroom and close the door. I walked out onto the balcony overlooking Central Park. It was fall in New York. The leaves were starting to turn yellow, people were taking leisurely walks in the park, and everything seemed so peaceful. But underneath this appearance of calm, my world was falling apart. I pulled out my cell phone and sent a message to my friend Thomas. "Can you come out for a drink? I need to chat." Thomas quickly replied, "Sure, see you at the usual place." I went back to my room and packed a few clothes and put them in my backpack. Emma came out of her bedroom and saw me packing, and a flash of panic flashed in her eyes. "You're leaving?" I nodded. "I need some time and space. I'll be staying at Thomas's for a couple days." Emma wanted to say something, but finally just said softly, "Okay, I understand. Alex, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." I looked at her with mixed feelings. How I wished I could hug her like I used to and tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. It's hard for me to even touch her now. "Take care of yourself, Emma," I said, picking up my backpack and walking out the door. As the elevator descended, I felt like my life was plummeting as well. At the moment, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if it's even possible for Emma and I to rebuild trust, and I don't know how I'm going to explain it all to Sophie. Lost in the crowd on the busy streets of New York, my mind was filled with uncertainty about the future. But I knew that no matter what, I had to be brave for myself, for Sophie, and face each day ahead. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved into Thomas's apartment in Brooklyn, and every morning I woke up and it took me a few seconds to remember where I was. The silhouette of the Brooklyn Bridge outside my window reminded me that life had turned upside down. Emma and I made a tentative agreement that we would try to maintain a superficial peace for Sophie's sake. I would come home 3 days a week, have dinner with Sophie, and spend the night in the guest room. The rest of the time, I would stay at Thomas's. The first night I came home, the atmosphere was breathtakingly awkward. Sophie excitedly ran to hug me and asked me why I hadn't been home for so long. I glanced at Emma, and she gave me a helpless look. "Daddy's been busy with work lately, baby." I knelt down and stroked Sophie's hair, "But I promise I'll be back with you more often." At dinner, the three of us sat at the dining room table, Sophie innocently recounting interesting things that had happened at school. Emma and I, on the other hand, carefully avoided eye contact, only exchanging a few words of conversation about Sophie when necessary. That night, as I lay on the bed in the guest room, listening to Sophie's even breathing next door, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. I wished I could go back to the old days when we were a happy family. But the reality was that that family no longer existed. Work became my escape from reality. I began to take the initiative to take on more projects and often worked late into the night. My coworkers said I was working especially hard lately, thinking I was preparing for a promotion and a raise. Only I knew that I was just running away from my broken home. Emma also seemed to be paralyzing herself with work. A few times I came home to see her on the phone on the balcony, her voice tired but determined. We were like two strangers, carefully coexisting in the same space, acting out a harmonious family drama for Sophie's sake. I was with Sophie one night when Emma knocked gently on the doorframe. "Alex, can we talk?" I nodded and followed her out onto the balcony. The night scene of New York unfolded beneath us, neon lights flashing and traffic flowing. Once upon a time, on nights like this, we would have snuggled together and thought about the future. And now, it was as if there was an invisible wall between us. Emma took a deep breath. "I want to see a counselor." I looked at her with some surprise. "Oh? I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did." Her voice trembled a little. "The counselor said I might have some emotionally dependent tendencies, always looking for outside approval and stimulation. But that's no excuse. Alex, did I know I hurt you? I hurt our family. I'm really sorry." I was silent for a moment, not knowing how to respond. Part of me wanted to hug her and tell her everything was going to be okay. The other part of me was filled with anger and distrust. "Thanks for telling me this, Emma, but it doesn't matter now," I finally said. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. Have you ever thought about our future? I mean, there's still a possibility that we could?" I turned around and looked at the distant skyline. I don't know, Emma. It's too early to tell. When I got back to Thomas, I told him about it. Thomas frowned as he listened and then said, Alex, I know you're in a lot of pain right now, but don't close yourself off completely. Give yourself some time and space to think and feel. Maybe you have a do-over. I laughed bitterly. Starting over. Thomas, you don't understand. Every time I see her, I get images of her with that man. I don't know if I can ever trust her again. Thomas patted me on the shoulder. Time will tell, bro. Over the next few days, I started trying to reacquaint myself. I signed up for a weekend photography class and revived a hobby from college. I wandered the streets of New York with my camera, capturing the pulse of the city. Sometimes I would stand on the Brooklyn Bridge for long periods of time, watching the sun rise and set and contemplating the impermanence of life. Emma seems to be trying to change as well. There have been times when I've come home to find her busy in the kitchen, the smells filling the air. I'm learning to cook Italian, she explained, a little embarrassed, and Sophie said she wanted authentic pasta. I nodded, a warmth flooding through me. At least for Sophie's sake, we're all trying. However, life is still full of little heartbreaking details. The other night, while tidying Sophie's room, I found a family portrait she had drawn. In the drawing, there was a crack between Mom and Dad. My heart clenched hard, realizing that our problems had affected Sophie. I told Emma about it. She was silent for a long time, then whispered, Maybe we should consider family counseling? For Sophie, I hesitated and nodded my head in agreement. Regardless of the outcome, at least we were both working to save the family. Life swings between pain and hope. Sometimes I wonder if we would still be the perfect family if I hadn't found out about Emma's betrayal. But I quickly dismissed the idea. A relationship built on lies is not sustainable. Fall is creeping up on New York. The leaves in Central Park are starting to turn yellow, and the streets are getting a little cooler. And my heart, like the city, is going through its own change of seasons. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that no matter what, I will stay strong for myself and for Sophie. After all, there are always countless possibilities awaiting us in the city that never sleeps. As fall slips away, New York welcomes the cold winter months. The trees in Central Park were bare, and the streets of Manhattan rushed by with pedestrians wrapped in tight coats. My relationship with Emma was shrouded in a chill, just like the city. For Sophie's sake, we tried to maintain a semblance of calm. We set up a strict schedule to make sure Sophie gets equal company from both sides. I take Sophie to and from school Monday through Wednesday, and Emma takes care of her on Thursdays and Fridays. On weekends, we take turns looking after her. This arrangement allows us to avoid face-to-face contact as much as possible while making sure Sophie doesn't feel neglected. However, life is always full of inescapable moments. Sophie's school organized a parent-teacher conference, and Emma and I had to attend it together. Sitting in the classroom, listening to the teacher talk about Sophie's performance at school, we were like a normal couple. But when other parents made offhand references to you two in conversation, I could feel Emma's body stiffen and I adjusted my sitting position uncomfortably. After leaving school, Emma hesitated and said, Alex, the teacher said Sophie has been a bit distracted lately. Do you think, is it because of us? I sighed. Maybe. We need to be more aware of her mood changes. Maybe we should consider having her see a child psychologist? Emma nodded. I agree. I'll make the arrangements. With that, we calmly discussed our daughter's future like two business partners. There was a time when such a conversation would have been accompanied by hugs and kisses, and now it was as if there was an invisible wall between us. Work became my escape from reality. I started taking on more projects and often worked late into the night. One day, my boss, Tom, called me into his office. Alex, you've been doing a great job lately. He said, we're thinking of putting you in charge of a big new project. It may require you to travel a lot, possibly for a few months. What do you think? I hesitated. The program was definitely a great opportunity, but it meant I wouldn't see Sophie for a long time. I need to think about it, I said. I'm in a bit of a complicated family situation. Tom nodded knowingly. I've heard rumors. Alex, if you need any help, just ask. I smiled gratefully and didn't say much. That night I told Emma about it. She was silent for a while, then said, "If it's going to help your career, you should go. I can look after Sophie for a while longer." I looked at her with mixed feelings. Emma was still the same Emma who had supported my career, but now that support left me with a tinge of bitterness. "Thanks," I said, "but I need to think about it again. Sophie needs both of us right now." Emma nodded, a flash of emotion in her eyes that I couldn't read. Over the weekend, my parents came to visit us in New York. We decided to host a small party at our house and invited some of our close neighbors and Sophie's little friends. It was the first time since we separated that we hosted such an event at our home. Throughout the afternoon, Emma and I tried to play the role of loving couple. We prepared food together, greeted guests, and organized games for Sophie and her friends. From an outsider's point of view, we might seem like a normal, happy couple. But when I glanced at Emma without thinking, I could see the exhaustion and apology in her eyes. I knew that this scene was an ordeal for both of us. Sophie had fallen asleep on the couch after dropping off the last of our guests for the evening. I gently carried her to bed and tucked her in. When I turned around, I found Emma standing in the doorway with tears in her eyes. "Isn't that what we used to be?" she asked softly. "A happy family?" I took a deep breath, not knowing how to respond. Yes, we were a happy family. But that happiness was based on my ignorance. Now, even though we can act out that happiness in front of outsiders, we both know that it's just an act. "Emma," I finally said, "we can't change the past. All we can do now is create the best possible environment for Sophie." She nodded, wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes. "I know. I miss our old life." I looked at her with mixed feelings. I miss that life too, but I don't know if we can ever go back to the way things were. The next morning, I saw a long letter from Emma in the kitchen. In the letter, she explained in detail what she had done, expressed deep remorse, and pleaded with me to give her a chance to start over. I sat at the kitchen bar and read the letter over and over again. Emma's handwriting was a little shaky, and there were slight water stains on the paper, obviously from her tears. My heart was full of contradictions. Part of me wanted to forgive her and save our marriage. The other part of me was filled with mistrust and fear of being hurt again. That afternoon, I was walking alone on the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind was chilly, but I was struggling violently inside. I remembered the scene where we proposed, the moment when we held each other and cried when Sophie was born. We had been so in love, so happy. Was there really no room for redemption? I took out my cell phone and hesitated for a long time before finally sending Emma a message. "I saw your letter. Maybe we can talk?" After sending this message, I took a long breath and felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. I don't know what the future holds, but at least I'm willing to try to understand and communicate. It's still a cold winter in New York, but there seems to be a warmth in my heart. Perhaps, like this never-ending city, our story is far from over. Perhaps, after all we've been through, we can build a new relationship, one that is more mature and resilient. Regardless of the outcome, I know that we'll keep working hard for Sophie's sake and for our own. Because in this city, every day is a new beginning, and every day is full of endless possibilities. Spring is late in New York. The trees in Central Park are beginning to sprout, and the people on the streets are shedding their heavy winter coats. And my relationship with Emma, like the city's, began to take a turn for the better after a long winter. Sophie's birthday is this spring. We decided to organize a small party at our house and invited a few of her best friends and some of our relatives. It was the first time we had prepared such an event together since we started living apart. I arrived home earlier than usual that morning. When I pushed open the door, I saw Emma busy in the kitchen, and the aroma of cake filled the air. "Do you need help?" I asked. Emma turned around with a hint of surprise and delight on her face. "Oh, Alex, you're just in time. Can you help me hang up the balloons?" We just went about our business in the kitchen, exchanging a few conversations about party arrangements every now and then. The atmosphere was a little awkward, but it was so much better than it had been a few months ago. The party went well. Sophie was happily playing with her friends while Emma and I silently greeted our guests. When Sophie blew out the candles, we stood on her right and left sides and applauded her. At that moment, we were like a normal, happy family. However, that familiar awkwardness crept back in when the guests left one by one, and it was just the three of us. Sophie was exhausted and soon fell asleep, leaving Emma and I to clean up the mess in the living room. Alex, Emma broke the silence. Do you think? Are we going to make it? I stop what I'm doing and look at her. Emma's eyes are full of anticipation and unease. I take a deep breath. I don't know, Emma, but I think we can try. For Sophie, she nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The next day, we contacted a family counselor, Dr. Martinez. Her office is located on the Upper East Side. At our first consultation, we sat across from Dr. Martinez and the atmosphere was a little tense. She smiled gently and said, "Tell me, what made you decide to come here?" Emma looked at me and then spoke. We want to save our marriage. For our daughter and for ourselves. For the next couple of hours, we talked openly about everything that had happened over the past few months. Emma cried and I choked up a couple of times. Dr. Martinez listened patiently, asking questions every now and then. Alex, she finally asked me, do you think you can forgive Emma? I was silent for a long time. Can I? I didn't know. I still felt a sharp pain every time I thought of the image of Emma and that man together. But when I see Sophie's innocent smiling face, when I think of all the good times Emma and I have shared, I feel again that maybe we deserve a chance to start over. I want to try. I finally said. Dr. Martinez nodded. It will take time and effort on both sides. But as long as you are both willing to try, there is still hope. Since then, we have been seeing Dr. Martinez every week, and slowly we have learned how to communicate better and how to deal with the negativity within us. Emma is also continuing her personal psychotherapy, trying to understand why she did what she did. One night, we sent Sophie to bed together. Watching her sleep, Emma whispered, Alex, I'm really sorry. I know my behavior has hurt you and our family. I will spend the rest of my life making up for it all. I looked at her and saw the sincerity and remorse in her eyes. I reached out and gently held her hand. I know. Let's work together, okay? Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. However, rebuilding trust is a long and difficult process. Sometimes, I would feel anxious because Emma came home a little late. Sometimes, I would wake up in the middle of the night worrying if Emma was cheating on me again. At every such time, I would remind myself to believe in the possibility of change. Slowly, some positive changes began to occur in our relationship. We started to communicate more, not just about Sophie, but about our respective jobs, hobbies, and interests. We even started taking one night a week to cook at home, just like we did when we first got married. One day, Emma suggested we take a walk on the Brooklyn Bridge. That's where I proposed to her. We stood on the bridge, watching the sunset and reminiscing about the past. Alex, Emma said softly, I know we have a long way to go, but I want to tell you that I love you. I've always loved you, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving it. I looked at her with mixed feelings. Can we start over after all we've been through? I don't know, but as I looked at the determination and sincerity in Emma's eyes, I felt a glimmer of hope. Let's take it slow, I said, one day at a time. Emma nodded, gratitude in her eyes. Now, almost a year has passed since I discovered Emma's betrayal. Our relationship is still fragile and still requires constant work and communication. But we are learning to trust each other again and rebuild our relationship. Sophie seems to sense the change in the atmosphere at home as well. She is smiling more and doing better in school. Seeing her happy face, I know our efforts are worthwhile. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe we'll finally be able to fully repair our relationship and rebuild a happy family. Maybe we'll realize that even after all the hard work we've done, we still can't fully overcome the hurts of the past. But no matter what, I know we'll keep trying for Sophie's sake and for our own. Like this never-ending city, life is always full of endless possibilities. And I will continue to move forward with hope and courage. Because I know that after all we've been through, no matter how it turns out, we'll all be better people and better parents. The night of New York gradually enveloped the whole city, but in this darkness, there are always stars and lights twinkling. Perhaps this is what hope looks like. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.